Thank you, Ted. Hi, everyone. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. It's David Hayling from Kent, who will be talking to us about passwords. Cheers. Thanks.
I suppose it's good afternoon now. Yes, password policy. As we'll have many aspects about policies here, I thought I'd just sort of a quick look at where they came from. When I started in computing some while ago, this is a terminal I was using, and they're based on, the policy is based on a lot of, I was going to say, ancient history. There were world-readable password files. I must admit the password hashes were there, but there was limited CPU capacity, so it would take some while to crack the passwords. So the concept of sort of changing your password infrequently was reasonable. I, in the civil service, had assigned passwords, and boy, were they painful. No, we weren't meant to write them down, but everyone did. They all kept in your top left-hand drawer of your desk. That's the most appropriate thing. But nice and reassuring, there's a limited physical access. So the computer systems that I used, you had to be in the office to make use of them, so that's a big barrier. So passwords, not so much of a worry. But more recently, it was sort of then easy enough to have a single good password. But the explosion in sort of recent decades with online services and all the rest of it, and lots of things that we've gone to. I mean, even my local cricket clubs have invited me to create an account, just have a password. You go, just have another password? Really, I'm not valuing their password system. So no, we can't manage the passwords that we have. But we keep, or at least the auditors keep demanding this certain level of quality of password a requirement in terms of policy, which I'm going to argue is really not really helping us. So my favorite topic, audit. Not that I expect you to necessarily read this bit, but it's a little excerpt from an audit that we had at my university in 2015. But the key part about this speech is the user account could be compromised through password guessing or cracking. And they were telling us that the fact that we require our staff to change their passwords at minimum, well, actually not just staff, but students as well, every 9 months, wasn't good enough, and it needs to be more. And they were proposing 90 days, or it could be even better, it could be 30 days. My thought was, how was that better? So I thought, I've tried this before in terms of having an argument with an auditor and haven't come off too well. So I thought, I'll be a little bit more calm this time. Let's start gathering some information. So one of the good questions is, where do policies come from? So a quick search on the web and you can find sorts of things about password policies, not necessarily expecting you to read these bits, but basically they all say things like, must be at least 8 characters long, must have sort of upper, lowercase, various combinations of other sort of runes to make the passwords more secure. How on earth they think they're going to actually accessibility is going to be sort of making use of that. Here's another one. Can't be your maiden name, or it can't be your friends' names, or how are they going to check for that one? Who knows? Or sort of a combination of all these sorts of things, and possibly you need to use your elbows as well to enact the password. Again, the question that springs to mind is, how is this actually making it better or more secure? But it's not. That's not the purpose behind these sorts of arguments that the auditors have been putting forward. It's to some degree, it's about being seen to do something. So conveniently, though, a bit more searching. Nice thing about being in the university, you can have people to help you search, or frankly, Google. So where do security policies come from? Research out of Microsoft by Florencio and Hurley. Very useful paper. There are references at the end. But reading in this one, they're talking about is actually different sort of communities have come to different positions with security policies or password policies. And the purpose behind them that they're arguing is to stop online brute force attacks, to address offline attacks of sort of having, let's capture the password files and then offline attack them, and password reuse across sites and those sorts of things. That's what they're arguing the policies are meant to protect you from. But those policies then don't actually help at all with the more common aspects, phishing, keylogging, session hijacking, any number of things. Frankly, it's always quite entertaining sort of after the beginning of the new academic year, let the students bed in for a few weeks, and then just go around and ask the student for their password, and they just give them up. It's like it's taking candy off a baby. So people don't protect their passwords. and yet the policies that we're putting in place are meant to make it more secure. And I really don't think in many cases that they do. So in that paper, they talk about measuring the policies by a concept of bit strength, and it's basically how complex they are, how many different character sets you're meant to use, how frequently you're meant to change them, how long they are, and that sort of thing. And they're using this to do some analysis. And they then sort of draw some conclusions. So that trial and error, trying to get your password policy right, is hard because the evidence actually doesn't stack up. So to be absolutely convinced that your policy is wrong, the bad stuff has to be really bad. And you go, most of us aren't there. So we can't sort of do the trial and evidence, trial and sort of effort type basis to work out what's just the right thing for policy. So we're sort of rather sort of fumbling around blind or taking the word of the auditor as this is the right password policy. It's really hard to gather the evidence. When you get breached, there isn't a big sign that says the reason you were breached was because of this failure. You just know you've had a breach. You have no idea why. And you can't point them, put them together. So they went and did quite a lot of analysis, and they noticed that there's different strengths of password policies. Was there any common factors? And sort of minimum strength, which was quite low, around about sort of 20 points and 20 bit. You notice that they're all like sort of Facebook, Yahoo, Gmail. And then you sort of look at, I don't know, it's quite convenient that they actually summarize this lot. 5 big universities in the US. They all had considerably more demanding policies. Why? And they looked at the whole lot, and they noticed that .com sites are considerably to the left, as you can see. That's the blue ones. So lower strength policy requirements. Universities, the red, were sort of in the middle, but definitely erring towards very, very strong. And government sites moved even further to the right. So clearly, given password policies, there must be a lot more value in protecting these accesses required in government and universities. And the .com sites, very low value, surely? No, that's not what they were concluding. Basically, they failed to find any positive correlation between increased security demands of policies and the actual password strength and that sort of thing, what you actually needed to protect. The practice of forcing, they also went on to say, regular password changes has little or no impact on improving security. That made me feel good. And it's mostly enforced by university and government sites. I went, yeah, that's familiar. So they also noted that there's an incrementing demand. So if you look at policies over time, they just get stronger and stronger. So back to that little chart, com on the left-hand side, not so demanding, government and universities to the right. What they observe is actually what is common about the people with very strong policies is that the user doesn't have a choice. If you go into a commercial site, you have a choice as to whether you use that commercial service. But largely, once you've become a student, you don't get a choice as to whether you're going to use the policies or not of your university. You're in the university. So, what should we do about it? The title will come evident later on, although probably a number of you already worked it out. Another paper, convenient, is also from Microsoft, but there are other papers in terms of talking about this sort of thing, it's about externalities. We put a lot of pressure on the users, but we don't account for the externalities. Actually, the users are quite smart. We might not think so. We often talk about sort of the threat is the users, but actually, they have a life to live. Users are hopelessly lazy. I think this is worse, actually reading out. Unmotivated on security questions. They choose weak passwords and ignore security warnings and oblivious to certificate errors. And in some ways, that's not surprising, really, because they, as I said, they've got a life to do. Our policies are trying to improve the situation by mandating length and composition, lots of characters and the rest of it. Dictionary membership, it can't be a word that's out there, make it up. Don't write it down. Don't share it with anyone, and all these sorts of things. And you go, we think, or we've argued that it's made it better, but believe me, it hasn't. So the policies that we've written have made it a burden on the user, but we haven't actually proven to ourselves that it's made it any better. So the users themselves are doing this cost-benefit analysis of whether to comply with security advice. They hear the likes of us talking, but do they actually do anything about it? And they're just making a judgment. The advice is offered to users to create a greater burden on them than the tax it is going to prevent. It's not the attack on the institution the student or the end user is worried about. It's what does it mean to them? What's the barrier to them? They're trying to get their stuff done. They go, ooh, I've got to think of a really big, deep, difficult password. So they understand the risks from their perspective better than we do. We are foolish if we keep arguing that the worst case harm is the thing they should think about, because actually, actual harm, most people's experience is fairly low. Compromised password, yeah, it wasn't sort of my account that was done over, it was somebody else's. And user effort isn't free. We might mandate that they do stuff, but it's a cost on them, not me, the one making the advice. It's them. So we're not designing security advice in an unconstrained way. There's optimizations happening on both sides. Three people, Bertrand, Adam, and Sass from the UCL, are arguing about the effect of compliance with security. So the x-axis there is perceived individual cost of compliance, and the y-axis there is the organization. If we're asking the user to do something that's really sort of not much of a barrier, swipe a card to get into a building, they're fine, they'll comply with that. But at some point, we'll find a threshold where we've asked them too much, and they will stop complying. And at that point, the cost to us to get them to comply that next bit is going to be almost, as it sort of suggests, it's off the scale. We can't make them comply. We have to persuade them. We have to make it worth their while. So, which is down to the old quote. Many people keep using this one. I think it's originally from Edward Felton. Given a choice between dancing pigs and security, users will pick dancing pigs every time. I keep on thinking about this when I'm sort of going around thinking of berating or having my colleagues berate the users. I just go, no, it's dancing pigs. That's what they're after. Or more realistically, it's actually getting on and doing their work. Security is a low priority. I couldn't quite get a dancing pig. Anyway. So, what should we do? Well, the threats are, according to JISC, a whole bunch of things, phishing, key logging, so on and so forth. But in terms of actual password policies, we're only going to be paying attention to a couple of them. So we have to do all the other stuff anyway. But we also have to pause and be happy that we've done a lot ourselves already. Okay, I'm speaking from my university, but I'm pretty sure largely many other universities do something similar. We have a lot of existing maturity in terms of protecting our systems. So it's not all bad. We've got onboarding processes for new systems. We do change the default passwords. We enforce complex passwords, prevent temporal reuse, antivirus, RPZ, or those sorts of things. We protect our servers. Could be better, but we do. We use certificates and not share the passwords. So there's a lot there already. So it's not all bad, but I just want to sort of address the auditors to some degree. So this is rather useful. I rather like the National Cyber Security Center. They're getting some good advice nowadays. They say change all default passwords. Yep, we do that. Hopefully you guys do. Help users cope with password overload. I think this is where the greatest value is out there. Passwords can be written down. I know it might be sacrilege, but if you protect it appropriately, you can write the password down, put it in a locked drawer, put it in a locked safe or something of this nature. So don't worry about it. Or password managers. They really do work. They are effective. Understand the limitations of user-generated passwords. So yes, they're going to have some passwords, but it's not going to be perfect, so have other checks and controls and balances there. Understand the limitations of machine-generated passwords. Yeah, don't let the machine generate it and dish it out to the end user. They're really not going to love you, so think of other ways of making use of those sorts of things. Really do this one. Prioritize the administrators and remote user access. That's really important. The average user is the average user. Your sysadmin person or the person with the control of the bank account, I think they're really important. User account lockout, protective monitoring. Protective monitoring is really useful. Look at abnormal behavior, start to analyze those logs. We've been collecting logs for years, but we really haven't mined them for the information that's available there. My university we're playing around with Splunk at the moment. Fascinating what you can find out of that one. It's really useful. I'd want to go much further in that direction. And don't store passwords as plain text. Any DBAs in the room? I'm looking at you. I really am. All of this is just, I think, really sensible advice. So this is what we should be doing. So back to the audit. So the user account could be compromised through password guessing or cracking. Well, it could be. Or more likely is the user's going to give up the password when they get asked. So, but anyway, this is an audit response. And really what they're asking us to do is go, they've seen something bad, and they want to do something about it. Really, I want to be a little bit smarter. The advice from the auditors, reduce the cycle time of passwords is a bit like sort of their aspiration that lemmings are going to fly and get to the edge of the cliff. Well, life isn't like that, as we all know. So I wrote a paper to argue or to respond to this suggestion that we reduce the time to live on passwords to 90 days. Lots of nice references at the back, which hopefully should reassure the senior committees of the organisation. And the main thing I wrote in that one was around these words from Hurley, is how can we help the users avoid harm? The users are not irrational. Exhaustive lists that seek to avoid all potential harms aren't helpful to them. Okay? And if we want something different in the outcome, right, we must present a better trade-off. Our exaltations in the past really haven't worked. So in seeking the worst case as advisors in the past, that we've said to them, we've underestimated the value of our advice. Well, sorry, we've exaggerated the value of our advice. And we've also assumed that the user, that their time and effort is zero cost. Well, they're telling us clearly it's not. So I proposed a change in policy. When asked to respond to the auditor, should we change it from 9 months down to 90 days, my response was, to quote Bruce Schneier, we must stop trying to fix the user to achieve security. Usable security does not mean getting people to do what we want. It means creating security that works given or despite what people do. So I proposed to the Senate committee that we, Information Services, propose to work towards an environment where forced periodic password changes are unnecessary and the requirement is removed. Now, I thought I was a bit of a punt there. I wasn't going to win, but they agreed. So, dear auditor, thank you for your advice, but no, we're not going to do that because I want to make it better for the end user. So, I think that's a key element, and that's how I end. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions, if you're happy to take
I'm happy to take questions, absolutely.
So has anyone got any questions? No. Yeah, just wait for the mic. Oh, sorry, there's one over here.
Hi, Frank Wadmore, University of Central Lancashire. We've gone down exactly the same route. Our auditors came in and said we should be changing password very periodically, but frequently. We've done an initial forced change password to force users to use a complex password, and then we're not forcing them anymore, and we feel that that is the right way to go down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it's promulgating out there. Fantastic.
Any other questions? One down here.
There's one up in the corner as well. But take Ted.
Take Ted first.
All right. Well, we're fortunate in that our VC is a computer scientist, and he was very annoyed that he had to keep changing his password. So I had to look into it, and what I found is the current advice from GCHQ, MI5, MI6, is that users not periodically change their password, and also the NIST draft in the U.S. So I cited all these documents, and we wrote it up, and we adopted that as policy, except if account has been hacked, we don't require the person to change their password. But all the evaluators, all the auditors, and even the Cyber Essentials, people will mark you down for not doing it. Why is this not catching up with them, do you think?
I agree. I find it frustrating. It is nice to have the likes of the National Cyber Security Centre on board, as far as I can see now, so that their advice is don't force periodic password changes. But you need to have some steps in place to spot where accounts have been breached and processes to actually ameliorate that one. So you can't ignore it completely. But you're quite right. I went and checked Cyber Essentials only a couple of days ago, and they still question 13, I think it is, do you force periodic password changes? Frustrating. PCI still demands it. So there's a lot of catching up to be done yet. But I feel that we're going in the right direction. As long as we have other things in place, such as monitoring, such as the ability to actually discover when accounts have been compromised, and make it easy for people to change their password, so that when we tell them, that they do so.
Great. One last question.
Hi. Can you hear me? Is that right? It's Rob Walker, University of Portsmouth. Yeah, I totally agree. At Portsmouth we have a non-existent password policy, and basically a minor constraint that says your password has to be 8 characters. And that has literally thrown the toys out of the pram for most auditors. But we test password strength. We actually crack passwords and or crack the whole suite of passwords, and we're finding that they're getting stronger. You know, more than 60% of our users, and that includes all the students, and 20,000 students, are actually using passwords that can't be cracked with conventional tools over 48 hours.
Yeah, it's
And,
fantastic.
yeah,
You're quite
so
right.
Just encouraging people really works, you know.
Indeed, absolutely. And it's making them value that password in its... If we have loads of passwords or whatever, then the individual value is quite low. So one of, I think, the important ones, and is advocated by JISC and myself as well, is we're keen on single sign-on, so that people can value our credentials with it, and they know that it has value and they make use of it. I'm not entirely convinced, though, in some of those areas there's some concern, because we keep asking them for their passwords for whatever. So I just want to check to see whether I can borrow a book. Can I have your password, please? Do we really need to ask them for the password at that point? However, then we use the same password to go, would you like to change your address in your student record? Where's your password? So it would be nice to actually have some variation in that sort of thing there, but we need to let the systems catch up with that subtlety there. But yes, quite right, they are getting better. Thank you.
Okay. Please join me in thanking David once again. Thank you.